Welcome to Let's Thrive Postpartum, where we tackle postpartum depression and anxiety head on, guiding you back to yourself. Join Kelly Siebold, founder of Thrive Postpartum, and Ashely Moore, a maternal mental health therapist. Through honesty and laughter, we share expert advice and real stories. While not therapy or medical advice, you'll find education, support, and hope. Welcome to the village. Let's thrive postpartum.
Welcome back to Let's Thrive Postpartum. I'm Kelly.
And I'm Ashely.
And we are so glad you're here with us today. We are going to talk about relationships and what postpartum depression and anxiety can do to relationships. But before we jump into something that, if you're struggling, it's probably a hard spot, let's start with something fun. Ashely, how was your week going? Anything positive that we can start off this deep conversation with?
Something positive. Well, we have a puppy. I think maybe I said that on one of the last episodes that we were going to be getting a puppy. So that's exciting. So we're basically potty training a puppy golden retriever and my 2-year-old kind of at the same time. So there's pee everywhere.
But also, how much fun to have a brand new puppy golden retriever. Are your kids loving her?
It is. They love her. Oh my gosh. The kids love her. And my 2-year-old, who is already a very strong-willed young lady, is very stern when she's saying like, "No, Luna, that's my toy," in her 2-year-old voice, of course. So that's been really amazing to watch. We just have the cleaning spray and paper towels stationed like in every single room so that
I can imagine the amount of pee.
we can clean up everything. Luckily, it's summer. We can get outside as much as possible. So
yes, and hopefully you're also getting as much sleep as possible between having small kids and a puppy. That's a lot on mom and dad.
yeah, we're making it work where we can, It'll only be for a short while.
It will. Oh, how much fun.
I know.
We're ready for a puppy on this side one day.
Yeah. What are you guys? What's going on your end?
We're just having good summer family time. Nothing real eventful, just lots of pool time and ventures outside. Just really enjoying our daughter's kind of discovering all the new things. She has something new she loves every day. And it's just fun to be in this phase to see her explore the world.
Oh, that sounds really wonderful. And it's good that you're spending that time together too. It feels good.
It does. And to see kind of all the innocence and just a brand new look at the world kind of gives you a good hope for humanity and what's coming ahead. It's really great to see.
I know. Yeah, there really is nothing better than like the delight in a little kid when they see something for the first time or they realize that they like something for the first time. It's just like, I don't know. Every time it happens, even with clients that I work with, I don't know. It just feels, it's very uplifting and so much fun.
It really does. And right now it's summertime and she's decided we're back on Santa. And she is so excited for Christmas. And I'm a huge Christmas fan. It's my favorite season. And so we are doing, I guess, Christmas in the summertime where we're watching it on cartoons when she needs it and we're singing Christmas songs. It also makes the heat much more bearable when you're thinking about December. So it's real fun.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That's so much fun. We're big Polar Express fans in our house.
We have never seen it.
Yeah. My kids love it just because it's a train. I think it literally could be any other storyline, but because it has a train in it, it's like number one.
Well, maybe we'll add that to our future movie watching when we have a movie day next time it storms or something.
Yeah.
Well, going into kind of all the positive outlooks, one of the more challenging parts, and I know if you're listening, you may be feeling this at some point, but if you're in a relationship or have a partner and you're going through postpartum depression and anxiety, it can really impact your relationship in ways that we might not talk about often or we may not address. And so Ashely and I today wanted to spend some time and talk about the areas that are most commonly impacted by postpartum depression and anxiety with a new child, and really ways that you can think about how to support you and your relationship during this time.
Yeah. And something too, I just thought about, Kelly, that I wanted to add on is keeping in mind too that not everyone going into pregnancy or everyone experiencing postpartum depression or anxiety is going into this situation with a healthy and supportive relationship. And so some of this too is about like, it can also be for the mom, ways to kind of support and empower yourself or to help advocate for yourself when things maybe are already a little bit difficult. And so I think that's something to consider too, is that everybody's in a different situation, different circumstances, and the status of a relationship when a baby is born can be all over the map, right? So sometimes it's looking like what is the current status of your relationship? Like, how strong is it? Is there a lot there that needs to be improved or a lot of extra support? And ways to weave in some of what we're going to talk about will help strengthen any relationship for sure. But some of this too, moms, you can take it and use some of this to help yourself advocate for yourself if you feel like that's something that's a little difficult in terms of how to ask for what you need.
That is a great point, Ashley. And I think just wanted to add to that, as Ashley said, not everyone's in a safe, supportive relationship, but there are stats where if you are in an abusive relationship, you are much more likely to get postpartum depression and anxiety. So if you are in a relationship that's not safe, kind of tips on how to make it better doesn't really apply, right? The number one thing is making sure you and your child are safe. I think a lot of our conversation is more around if you're trying to steady it and it's in a healthy relationship, how can you make it better? This isn't a, hey, stick through a bad relationship if it's not safe. I want to start off just kind of reading a quote that struck me, Ashley, before we get into it, because I think it's really raw and really vulnerable. And I also think based on all the moms that we have spoken with, seems to hold true a lot of the time. And I don't know if you're aware, Ashley, I know you know her, but if you're listening, Karen Kleiman is a great therapist. She has done a ton of books to help moms with postpartum depression. And this quote is from her book called Tokens of Affection, Reclaiming Your Marriage After Postpartum Depression. And it's all about, how to really restore that. But the quote that just really touched me is this: feelings are hurt, thoughts are distorted, intentions are misinterpreted, clarity is absent, and joy is nowhere to be found. And when you're having a baby, brand new baby, supposed to be the most joyful time of your life. And I think that joy is nowhere to be found really can sum up what it feels like in a relationship, having postpartum depression in a brand new child. It just doesn't feel like you think it should.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the hardest things too is if you have postpartum depression, anxiety, you are kind of suffering from this disconnection from everyone, like not just your child, but your spouse, potentially other children or people that live in your house. And that makes it even harder because our natural tendencies when we're anxious and depressed are to kind of like withdraw like into ourselves, which we know isn't helpful. But when you're feeling disconnected from multiple relationships because of your anxiety and depression is hard. It doesn't feel good.
And I've seen this quote so many times about relationship hate and that it can make you hate your partner suddenly, kind of going through this. But I think you're right. It's that disconnection and all the anxiety and depression. It can just impact how you feel, not about yourself, but also about that relationship.
Yeah. So Kelly, I think you said you had like 5 different like areas how it affects relationships. I think it'd be interesting for us to kind of go through each one of those, talk about how it can affect marriages and partnerships, and maybe some ideas about what people can do about it. Try and make that repair.
Let's do it. I think that's a great idea. So marriage.com has done a lot of research into relationships during postpartum depression and anxiety. And they identified 5 key areas within a relationship that are impacted during this time. So actually, I'll read them all out and then we'll kind of go through if you're feeling the same way, things to do. So the first one is decreased time together. The second is increased and unbalanced workload. Third, poor communication. 4, increased arguments. And then finally, number 5, financial issues. And those are 5 really big kind of relationship issues, even if they were just one-off, much less if you're kind of going through all 5.
Yeah.
So Ashley, if we start from the top, and we really talk about decreased time together. What does that feel like? What are you seeing from from a therapist perspective?
So I think too, and we had talked about this a little bit before. So all of these things are going to happen, right, to anyone in a way after they've had a baby. And these are going to be issues that any couple who's welcoming a baby is going to be navigating. Adding the layer of having postpartum and depression, anxiety can make some of these bigger, and it can make some of them harder to overcome in a way. This first one, decreased time. Like I was saying, sometimes, when we're anxious and depressed, we don't want to connect with other people. We don't want to be around other people and seek out those relationships, even with our spouse sometimes, let alone with other people. And so that decreased time together that's one way that postpartum and depression and anxiety is affecting that piece of a relationship, because you don't want to be around people. And that might include your spouse, which is really hard.
Yeah. And especially when you have a new baby, brand new or within that first year, so much of both of your time is going to that baby. Whereas before, maybe it was doing a hobby we loved together.
Mm-hmm.
Ashley, is this what the term roommate phase is about? Because I hear a lot about new parents hitting the roommate phase. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, the roommate phase, I think it's exactly that. It's where, two people, your whole world has become revolved around the children. What do the children need? What do they want to do? What interests them? And that kind of infiltrates everything. What movies you watch, where you go to dinner, the activities that you're doing. And sometimes years can go by before you realize, like, oh my gosh, when is the last time I did something with my spouse that was something we love doing, a restaurant we love going to do, like to try, or an activity or something like that. And that's where people, when you don't spend that time together, you kind of lose that whole perspective and like the memory of what it was like to be a couple before you had a baby. And I tell people all the time, like, just when the baby's born, your interests don't evaporate. Like, the things that you like to do don't disappear just because you aren't able to do them. They're still there in our minds. And the sooner that we can kind of realize, like, oh gosh, we've not had some good time together, we've not been able to do any of the things that we used to love doing, the sooner you realize that and kind of make a plan to bring some of that back into the relationship. It feels weird. And every new parent will tell you, like, that first time going on a date night or first time like having a night away, it feels so strange because you're straddling worlds, right? You're like one foot in parenthood, one foot back in remembering what it was like before the baby was born. But it's so important and kind of to regain feeling good and confident and grounded in your relationship with your spouse, because like you two, that relationship still matters in addition to the relationship that you now have like with your child.
Mm-hmm. It may be that you've got to look at new things that interest you now together that you can do. So stuff that we used to love to do was outside of the house, which once our child was in bed was not easy to do unless we had a babysitter all the time. So looking at, if we only have free time together from these hours, what can we do in those times? Is it play a video game? Is it redo furniture? What might be new that you can do to give yourself a little bit more of that couple time when you can fit it in?
Yep, definitely.
Because I think all of us feel that decreased time together.
Yep. Well, I think the other piece too is you think like the end of the day, you're so tired and you're exhausted. And sometimes it's like, well, I just want to go lay down and go to bed. And the other person is like, well, I'm not tired. Like, I want to stay up and watch a movie. And that's fine, right? For everybody to be able to explore their own interests and do what they feel like they need. But that sometimes too becomes a pattern to where in those moments when the kids are asleep or something, you're still not finding that time to like reconnect. So it's kind of just looking at like your life and routine and stuff and see like where can we try and fit a little bit more in.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's go to number 2, and that's really looking at the increased and unbalanced workload. And a lot of us know that it just inherently falls on the mom, whether that's even down to breastfeeding, things that we can do that our partner or spouse cannot do. A lot of that childhood burden being placed on us. Also, if you're struggling, that can lead to a lot of mom rage and anxiety, stuff we talked about in a previous episode, or if some of those needs for support aren't being met. How do we talk about this, and how do we maybe even ask for help better if that we feel like that workload isn't balanced?
Yeah, this is such a hard one. And I think something that everyone struggles with. Keeping in mind too, like sometimes when like with postpartum depression and anxiety, we already know like it does make it harder to do the things that we need to do, right? That's everything, washing the dishes, feeding the baby, like getting outside and on a walk, like all these things. And then there's the guilt that comes in. We're not doing what we feel like we, quote, should be doing, keeping up with our part of the load. I have lots of air quotes for you guys that are out there watching this. Anytime, by the way, you hear yourself, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, take out the should, because that doesn't do anything but make you feel guilty. It just isn't, it's never helpful. And if you say it to another person, it's going to make them angry. If somebody says it to you, it's going to make you feel angry. If you say it to yourself, you just feel guilty. So
that is such a great advice. Something I should probably do more in my life. Something I should do that just came out. You even notice that was just on accident, but
yeah. So like with the workload, this is where communication can be so key, because sometimes instead of assuming, right, the one person's responsibilities are or are not going to be, having a conversation ahead of time, like maybe even we're never going to know everything before the baby's born, but ahead of time saying, like, sitting down with your spouse or partner and saying, what could we plan for? Like, what is something you can take care of? What am I going to take care of? Like, what could you do? Especially those first, like 3 months, maybe like even up to like 6 months when you're just a little bit in survival mode, is like, what can you do? What can I do? This goes back to like your postpartum plan, Kelly, of thinking who can take on some responsibility so that I'm not assuming and then being resentful when they're not doing something that I expected them to do, but we never talked about it. So it's possible they didn't know they needed to do it.
So let me ask if you have any good therapy or quick tips on this. So I've learned through this experience, I'm terrible at asking for help. I'm great at being self-sufficient and doing it on my own, but asking somebody to please do something, and I needed so much help in that point. I can't be the only one who is in that situation. Do you have any tips or ways if somebody is struggling and needs help from their spouse, how to ask for it, even if it's not directly? Maybe it's directly.
Yeah. Well, one of the indirect ways, and maybe we had talked about this during the plan, though, especially immediately postpartum, is like just having a list, like something posted on the fridge where it's not something you have to ask for, but again, something you've pre-planned to say, here's a couple things like I don't feel like I can handle or I don't want to worry about for the first X number of weeks, right? Can you help? I need somebody to do the laundry. I want to have enough frozen food. I want help washing the baby bottles. Like whatever it is, having something there that is maybe your way of communicating what you need without having to verbalize it. Sometimes writing it down and having that list provides a little separation than having to ask for the help. Now, if even conceptualizing and thinking of writing down these things that you need is hard, part of this goes back to just thinking and asking yourself, like, is my life going to be easier by not asking for help? Or could my life maybe feel like, is it going to be easier if I do ask for help? And just giving yourself, like, kind of rationalizing with yourself and saying, like, this doesn't, like, it's not helpful to me to do it all on my own, right? You're going to try. I tried. You tried. You're going to try and do it. And you're going to realize, this is not great. I need help.
Can't do it on your own.
Help.
Yes.
And that's okay. Like all of our, we make choices every day that are either helpful or unhelpful for us. And I'm like, asking for help is always going to be a helpful choice.
It is. And I love the idea, writing it down if you can't ask, putting it on the refrigerator. Here's the things, partner, I need help with today. And they may be different tomorrow.
Yeah.
So that
and just trying to communicate.
Exactly. And that leads us perfectly into number 3, which is poor communication.
Poor communication.
And poor communication can mean so many things. But let's talk about, you've got a baby, got a child, and you're just struggling to communicate. And maybe, Ashely, it's even communicating clearly of how you feel when you don't feel the way you should. Like being able to say, I feel like I'm struggling. I'm not as happy. I'm having scary thoughts.
Yeah.
down to, can you help me? How can we communicate better with a partner?
Those are great statements. Like all the statements you just said, like, I feel like I'm struggling. I feel like I'm really sad most of the day. I feel like I've been crying a lot and I don't know why. I feel like I'm not able to do the things or find joy in the things that I used to find joy in. All of these different statements communicate to someone like, I'm not really okay. Like something is wrong. And I think the hard thing is everyone knows that postpartum, no matter what, is hard. And so to a spouse or somebody listening, that very first time that you say that, it might be that they don't know what to do with it, right? Or they're like, maybe it's this way. Even as moms, you're going to be saying, maybe it's this way for everyone. Everyone feels this way. Maybe, I don't know. Keep communicating and advocating like for yourself, right? If you feel like something's not quite right, pick up the phone and call your doctor, right? Communicate it to a friend, communicate it to a spouse, knowing that unfortunately, like it might have to be communicated more than just once for them to understand, like, I think something is a little outside what we would say, like the range of kind of a typical experience. And that would indicate potentially like postpartum depression or anxiety. The other thing that's always helpful is, I mean, standard relationship communication is always trying to say, like, I feel, or like, when this happened, I felt. It is really hard to argue with someone's feeling because we're not in their head. We don't know like what's going on for them. And so when someone says, if you say to your partner, like, I'm feeling really misunderstood because I've been saying all these things and no one seems to care, right? Or like, I've been really struggling and I feel disappointed that I'm not getting enough support or I'm not getting this kind of support. Effective communication doesn't really mean that it's easy, right? It doesn't mean that the conversations are going to go really well, but it does mean that you're able to communicate what you need and like what's hard for you in that moment. And we can't be, I mean, we don't know how the other person is going to respond, but trying to communicate, it is so essential and so important that couples try and figure out what communication style works for them so that you just know and respect what the other person needs.
And I think you said a really good example in saying, instead of saying, you're not supporting me, you're not helping me enough with the baby, which may be true and valid for you, but saying, I don't feel supportive enough in this area or whatever it would be. It's talking more about the I statement versus is a lot less aggressive. And you're right, it is something that's much more open to having a conversation where in the moment, you may just want to say you aren't doing this, which you can fight back with. So how do you communicate it without that?
Yeah. Yeah. Using the you statements or the you statements is normally going to be, sounds a little more like blaming and like assigning blame, which usually we want to try to avoid in a healthy conversation.
And again, perfect segue into number 4. The other thing they saw was increased arguments. And so this could come to a lot of things, right? Those first couple of months, you both may be having sleep deprivation and your ability to be calm and rational may be reduced overall with the added a bunch of anxiety, the depression feelings. It kind of is easy to understand why a lot of couples fight more in this area if they're struggling. How do we work through increased arguments?
Yeah. It's really common. I mean, you're right. Like you're tired, you're overwhelmed, you're trying to figure things out and muddle through, and it's just hard. And that's like the perfect recipe for an argument to occur. I think a lot of times what I see in couples is the arguments are a lot of the time about something that happened, and you're arguing about what happened, what was said, what someone did or didn't do, and that kind of thing. And you're not saying how you feel about it. Right. So this is where it's like, I felt neglected when you did da 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 da, rather than saying, well, you did that. Well, I did that because you did that. And so I always tell people, I'm like, try. And if you notice you're arguing about what happened or what was said, try and put a pause on it and say how you feel. Like, I felt this or I feel this way. And it gets down to kind of the meat of what's going on. So with a couple, especially going through where the mom is experiencing and potentially even the dad postpartum depression and anxiety, under the anger is something else, right? It's feeling helpless. It's feeling scared. It's feeling like things are never going to be the same again. And there's almost always going to be something that like both can agree on, right? And so trying to think about like what's under the anger. And that's like communication, like sitting down and saying like, oh my gosh, we have been arguing nonstop for the past week. Really, it doesn't feel good. It's not like us. This isn't the kind of relationship that we usually have. What else is going on? Like, what is under the anger? Is it that someone is really tired and needs a break? Is it that someone is really scared and overwhelmed? Is it that somebody's experiencing depression or anxiety that they need to seek treatment and help for, right? There's almost always something else going on, like under the anger that's kind of providing the fuel for it. And it comes out as anger because that's so much easier to say than I'm scared.
Or I'm stressed. And that kind of brings us to the fifth one that marriage.com brings back to financial issues causing additional stress to the relationship. And this really could be for any new mom, right? You've got additional cost of having a child, the cost of the child, actually the diapers, the food, all the equipment that you need to go along with the child. Maybe you're having to stop work because you're doing childcare, and or you're going back to work, which then means you have the additional financial stress of paying for daycare or childcare. So all of this can really just increase that underlying stress. Ashley, I know there's nothing really just to say, here's extra money. This fixes your financial issues. How do you deal with those issues when they're there, right? Because all of us kind of feel these at different times.
Yeah. I mean, this one especially, I think, comes back to communication and how you talk about money. Finances are one thing that you, outside of people losing their jobs or things like that, like you can try to plan for as best as possible, while you're pregnant, looking at trying to project out like what are the costs, what's going on, how are we going to make it work, and kind of putting a plan into action. But a lot of with money, it's how do you talk about money? And can you communicate about it without assigning blame? Can you talk about like what can't be spent? But figuring out how to have that conversation together so that everybody's on the same page. And especially with money, maybe trying to come up with a plan, like have a conversation where there's something coming out of it with like either we're doing okay, we can keep going the way we're going, or things are a little tight and we need to implement a budget, and having a conversation that way. Yeah, money, no matter what, if it's in every relationship, is always can be a contentious topic.
And I think going back to all of these, that underlying theme that you keep talking about is just communication and really talking about that. And sometimes that is hard when you are struggling. You don't know how to communicate what's happening to you and doing it. So if you're, struggling, and if you're talking to a therapist, if you're in there, it may even be something that a ton of couples who've gone through this, who have said, in addition to the wife getting support and counseling or whatever for herself to deal with the postpartum depression and anxiety, they've also sought someone to help them with their relationship and doing, relationship therapy to kind of help them build some of those stronger foundations. Because so many moms that we talk to have said over and over again, I didn't think our marriage was going to make it. We were on the verge of divorce. And whether both sided, or if that is a lot from the mom kind of coming in and saying, I was feeling so bad, and it also just kind of emanated into our relationship, there's a lot of help. And I do feel, Ashley, what do you think about this? But all the moms that I've spoken with recently who are on the other side of postpartum depression have been able to look back and say, it was terrible in our marriage. It was one of the hardest points, but we worked hard. We got help. We are much better communicators now. And after going through it, our relationship is so much stronger because we know we can. And I think having that, we've been through the worst part of our lives together and we found a way to turn together versus away, is helpful, and also can be very hard in the moment.
Yeah. I don't remember who said it, but there's a phrase like turn toward, like you said, like when you're in times of crisis or stress or whatever it is, like ideally your partner your spouse is who you turn toward to seek support, reassurance, comfort, that kind of thing. And when you have kids, there's kind of something in between you and your spouse, it seems at times, especially in the beginning, that everybody's turned towards the kid, but you're kind of like missing each other. And I like to think about like relationships when you have a baby is it transforms, right? It's not necessarily better or worse. Could be either of those. But when you are adding someone to your life, of course, life cannot stay exactly the same with just a little person, right? Because you're not going to be the same person with your identity and the roles and everything. And so to try and look at it, I think there's often a struggle of like, I'm losing my sense of identity, or I can't do these things that I used to love doing. And you feel like it has to be an either or. I'm either a mom full in, or I'm like still trying to hold on to my former identity. And it doesn't have to be either or. You kind of transform into a blend. And the same thing happens to your spouse. And the same thing's going to happen to your relationship. And so trying to think about it instead of like a positive, negative, I can't do this, now I have to do this, right? Like those don't really feel good to say. There's all kinds of new opportunities that can come up when two people are willing to like talk about what's hard, celebrate what's going well, and kind of at times like commiserate, right, with the other person about like, oh my gosh,
Like this could be terrible and we're in it together.
this is tough.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think you're right. That identity shift can make such an impact on you as a person that, and I think it's something that we talk a ton about, that your identity and what you can do changes so much more at the beginning than a partner's does, because you physically just had a child. You're going through hormones. You're feeding a child. All the things that happen to you, your partner's life tends to go on a little bit less interrupted than yours. And that even adds to the relationship challenge, or how are you still so normal? I don't feel this way. But you're right, that communication, realizing you can be both and your identity doesn't completely have to change, is a good lesson and a hard one to kind of work through.
I know. And I think the biggest one about relationships, is just trying to hold on to the fact that in most cases, everybody's doing the best that they can, right? Mom's doing the best she can. Dad's doing the best they can. A lot of times, though, there's just a lot of miscommunication that's leading to that resentment, to the anger, to the frustration, needs like not being met on both sides. That leaves both people feeling like, oh my gosh, like what is going on? But that you're kind of a team in a way. And the first thing, though, to even address it is to say, hey, things don't feel good right now, right? That's hard. It's hard to get to that first step of saying, like, this is not like the way things are right now is not how I want them to feel, right? Like, I don't feel connected. I don't feel supported. The other person, given the opportunity, will probably say the same thing, right? And the hard part, though, is that's hurtful, because then we automatically assume, well, it's my fault or it's your fault. But if both people can get to the starting place of, this doesn't feel good, our relationship does not feeling the way I want it to feel, let's do something about it. If both people can get there, then there's lots and lots of things that can be done.
Which is such a good kind of reminder in that moment. You're in this together and there are things you can do to help it. I think you're right, Ashley, being able to say, hey, we're not good. This doesn't feel good. Now, how do we communicate and communicate and communicate and overly communicate our way through it and communicate some more? Because I think that's what it comes down to, especially when you don't feel great. How do you just keep communicating from both of you? And I do feel all the positives that we've heard is so many moms saying, I hated my husband. Our relationship was going to get a divorce. We made it through and we're so much stronger. I think going through something really hard helps people build that more solid foundation. So communicate, communicate, communicate if you feel like it's not where you want to be. Ashley, any other words of wisdom for our moms out there?
I think just as usual, like Kelly and I know that it's hard and that sometimes things go the way we hoped and planned and sometimes they don't. But that doesn't mean that for certain things they can't improve or change. Everything will change. I always say that. The only thing certain in life is that things will change. They won't be the same.
Yes.
And so
good point.
if just thinking and acknowledging like to yourself, what do I need? What feels good? What doesn't feel good? Voice that to your partner. And hopefully like both people get to that place where they are like, yeah, we need to work on things. It's really a wonderful place to be because then you're really on the same team and you kind of have the same goal. And that's what feels like really hopeful.
It does. And we are here for you. So anytime you just need extra advice or support, we're here for you. Even if you have questions that you want me and Ashely to address and answer, email us at podcast@wethrivepostpartum.com. We're happy to kind of give some advice or chat through any questions. Ashely, thank you for giving us some good practical steps and just reminding us how key constant communication is in this, if you're in a partnership for both people.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you. We'll see you guys next week.
If you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, please be sure to hit subscribe, leave us your feedback, and give us a 5-star review. For even more support, visit us at wethrivepostpartum.com/podcast to sign up for our newsletter and learn more about our community. Remember, you are not alone. With support, you can feel better. Together, let's thrive postpartum.